I basically kind of didn't have anything to consult or reference for this type of depiction, and I knew from the outset that I wanted it to be like very all kinds of knotwork, all kinds of Norse imagery, but the oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of the race of people that created the map in the book, but Svartalos, was that it?
Yeah.
I think so. But alright, I'm going to stop that tangent. That's what I get when I get really excited about maps. But yeah, like this is probably my all-time favorite because it was the hardest to do. Because we are now like many generations, many hundreds of years past the point where these like beautiful Norse illustrations were being made. I felt like I could kind of fuse a slightly more like modern graphic sensibility with this beautiful like Norse knotwork, and so you'll be able to see it upstairs. I'm kind of finding difficulty putting it into words, but I wanted to make it as like boldly graphic as possible while still sort of trying to preserve that same knotwork tradition, and so because there's so many details that I had to kind of fit into that world, I knew that the graphic design had to be just like crystal clear in order for everything to read and it just not to look like a total mishmash. So I guess to kind of get back to what your question was asking, like how do I map this very amorphous thing, like that again came from Kevin, like the notion that there are these three planes. I don't remember whether or not he requested the planes be like discs, but I liked the idea of these sort of three discs stacking on top of each other and then being like framed by these knotwork triangles and like looked like they were the product of all of these sort of interlocking circles. So yeah, partially sort of my own invention and partially Kevin's suggestion. And I would love to meet him never. I will text Jim and tell him that.
When you were describing your experience making the first map that you made and the extensive research that you did and looking at how long it took people to travel, I couldn't help thinking you probably ended up knowing more about the exact mapping of that world than the author did.
Oh, yes.
And I wondered what would happen if, in doing this, there were inconsistencies or you found things that were difficult to map.
There were.
Yeah, I most authors didn't plan things as meticulously as you researched. How would you address that when you had to go make a map?
Just whichever version, like if there was one instance where it was wrong and one instance where it was one way and 5 instances where it was another way, I would go with the more popular usage. Then anything else, I just I tried to figure out how it could work it both ways, but in other instances I just fudged. Because I didn't think that anyone would say, like, it took 5 days to get from here to here. Like, if someone actually did come up to me and said that, like, I would shake their hand and buy them a drink.
So, considering the printing constraints that you have, right, I'm interested in your process. So, at first, when you're conceiving of a world and researching a world and you've got an idea about it, do you start with, like, this immensely, intensely detailed thing and fall back to that kind of bold graphic can be printed in the book? Does it feel like poetry is what I'm asking? Because you have to like carve words out?
Now that you mention it, kind of, yeah. I mean, it's kind of this balance of give and take,
like,
I guess.
3 world business, I can imagine that it was supremely ornate and then had to be scaled back for printing constraints. And that ebook question is interesting because I worked in publishing. Publishers don't do a separate version for the ebook. It's the paper version cheaply manufactured into the print. I mean, like, there's no consideration for that. I'm just gonna say that. There's not, unless you were like Stephen King or can make $1 billion on books, you're not getting a separate version. You know, like that's. Anyway, that's fine, but it feels like poetry, what you're saying is.
Yeah, as I was saying, there's very much a give and take. Like I'll put all of the, I mean, in a way, it's generally often not too congested because there are only so many things that, like only so many places that the author can mention in this book. What tends to be more challenging is like when there are a lot of places in like one tight area, and you have to figure out like, okay, can this actually justify a blow up like I did for the Calderon Valley? Because like there are a lot of things in a spot that small that would like read as a pixel essentially in the paperback version. So yeah, it's just a matter of like figuring out where you need to place text, like where you need to arrange things, like how many mountains can you have? Like, yeah, it's definitely a give and take, I guess. And I feel like someone over here had a question that I've been ignoring.
It was a little bit related to, I think, her point is that, you know, when we read a book, we see the finished product. We don't see the drafts that went behind it. And so, and when we look at these paintings, we see the finished product, and we know that the artist did other renditions when they were studying the color and the light and things. So how many iterations do you do for a particular map?
If I like looked back at all the saved versions that I've like pestered authors with over time, a lot. Yeah, I mean, generally, especially toward the end, there's this very difficult time where there's a question of whether or not the map really gels, and it's this very like indefinable quality that I still struggle with for a good portion of the time. As I've done every map, it has not gotten any easier, but like a balance between like how much of the land like has pencil marks over it, like whether the map feels like it's a real place, and oftentimes like I will finish all of the rest of the things that I wanted to do, and then for just a week it's just like moving pixels and like adding things, subtracting things, like trying to make it look like, pardon me, a cohesive thing. And so I think that might be sort of getting at what you're saying.
So in that sense, it's very similar to a writer. You know, how does he know when his book is done, or the painter? How do they know when the painting is done? It just feels right. Yeah.
Or when the deadline is.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Have you ever turned down an author for doing a map, and what would be the factors that make you decide, okay, I'm not doing that?
Pretty much the only times has just been an issue of like time constraints.
Okay.
Like there are a number of people that I had to turn down while I was in grad school. Like generally, if it's someone that like I respect their work, I am friends with them on Twitter. Like I think that they're a totally awesome person. I will figure out how to make it work with my schedule. But and then there have been a lot of people that had approached me for gaming maps for their group and don't really get that there's a certain price point associated with like the type of work that I do, and so just like the idea that like, sorry, like I'm not really sure if you could afford me, which is the most awkward thing to say. Oh my gosh. But yeah, so there have been a lot of people that I've had to say no to over the years, but a lot of people that I'm really excited to hopefully say yes to over the years.
Just kind of consequence of that, are there any authors you would really like to work for you haven't worked for yet? Like what series, what books?
Yes, I'm really good friends with the author Pat Rothfuss, and we're like trying to figure out a time to do something. I mean, he has a really beautiful map in his series done by Nate Taylor, and neither of us want to step on his toes, but like he recently did a Kickstarter for this game called Tack that takes place in his world, which is an awesome game. Like you should absolutely get it when it comes out. It's so much fun. And like they were doing like different like stretch goals for different boards, and Pat asked me if I could contribute like a map style board to that, and unfortunately like he asked me too late. It was just way too late. Like I didn't have time in my schedule to be able to do something, but we both know that like sometime we need to do something together. Anyone else?
Is there a map maker that's your favorite, or someone who really influences your work?
There's so many ridiculously awesome people. Actually, the ancient map of fairyland put forth something by Bernard Slay. That's upstairs that they were just oohing and awing about. That's really gorgeous. That was actually kind of at the beginning of the process for the Toby Day map, that was kind of one of the touch points, so I kind of veered away from that aesthetic. You can really see it in the little two fairies at the top holding up the seal. That's pure Bernard Slay. Yeah, it's less a matter of like having people that particularly influence like what I do, and more just I am a ridiculous fangirl of their works. Like Jules Pfeffer, who did the Phantom Toll Booth map. I got to meet him when I still lived in New York, and he was just the nicest guy. And the artist for Leviathan, that map is just stunningly beautiful, and I would like chop off a limb to be able to create the beautiful pieces that he could. Yeah.
Is this the last question? Yeah. Last question. Are you paid for dinner?
Thank you all so much.
So we invite all of y'all to head up to the second floor to see the exhibit, and there will be